am Shaggy. I am Philaletea. And I am getting set up the last of the way to do a Spoopyween reading for you. We're going to finish the coming race, and if we finish the coming race at a decent hour, I'm going to try to finish the coming race. I don't know if I will succeed. The goal is to finish the coming race, and if we achieve that goal, rather than not work anymore, we will continue with the next book and the selected reading that I have for you. I'm not going to be telling you what that book is. You will be learning when you learn, because I am trying to teach you how to take moments as they are. And sometimes stories come to us in bits and pieces. When I was a little kid, I didn't get to sit and watch every episode of a show that came out. What I had to do was catch it when I could catch it over the course of years, and I had to figure out which episodes were in what order. And so piecing together the narrative fiction in the world around me, like I used to pick up books in the middle of sequels. I used to judge series by whether you could pick them up in the middle and the author was able to tell the story without telling every single book before it. I judge people like Brandon Sanderson, for example, as an author that I got really annoyed reading because he has to, in granular detail, explain every previous book. He can't just trust you on the merit of what he is writing in the scene right now. He can't trust you to understand what's going on, and that there are books that you should have read before this moment. He can't trust every scene to stand on its own merit with the scenes that build upon it. And so, like, a show that I used to really like was Eureka, because you could watch Eureka like that. You could put Eureka on, and you could have the whole show up until the writer's strike on shuffle, and every episode stands alone as watchable and is enjoyable and is a snapshot into these characters. And then as the plot, the actual story that they're trying to tell you develops, you can watch it out of order and still enjoy the impact of the story, of what they're trying to tell you. And that really that whether it inspired me or it informed how I tell stories, how I engage with people. So I have a lot of things that are like at the beginning, or when I read for you, sometimes I'll just pick you up right in the middle, literally in the middle of a chapter. Or when I'm reading live, you come in at the middle of a chapter and you're not intelligent enough to say to yourself, this is the middle. I'll scroll back to the beginning. You'll say to me, what is this? Summarize what you're reading. And so what I do is just trust you to figure it out, because if you're not going to figure it out for yourself, I'm not going to figure it out for you. What no one has ever done in the history of the universe is buy a book and then get the author to one-on-one explain the work to them. That has never happened in the history of the universe. What I am doing is a deeply ancient storytelling tradition. I do expect the respect and the fiduciary reward that comes with the lived expression of very ancient storytelling techniques, including living in this tent for the winter. And if you don't want to, that's fine. I don't want to hear about how you don't tip. It's not for you. You can enjoy it. I just don't need to know you exist. We're going to be reading tonight from Edward Bulwer Lytton's The Coming Race. Pepsi doesn't know you exist. I don't need to know you exist if you're not buying my material. The coming race, as it is closing up, I should predict for you what's about to happen, because our author keeps forgetting that narrative fiction needs a plot. It just one of the things that narrative fiction needs is a setting, it needs characters, and it needs a plot. It just badly needs a plot. Narrative fiction does. And so he's written this story, and he wants us to suspend our disbelief that this is not narrative fiction, that it's narrative nonfiction. And so it's narrative nonfiction. And so he can break the rule of developing a plot. Um, he can break that rule because he's at the beginning of the coming literary fiction landfill, where there doesn't need to be a plot, it's just literary. And so what he's doing is he's being literary, in his creating this alternate history of this guy, and he's trying to be clever, and he's trying to critique the United States, and he's trying to sell um, this story to Americans. So he's not trying to critique them too much, us too much, because he's not a good writer. He's sensitive, and he knows he doesn't really have a good story to tell. This is also a first draft. It's just very obviously a first draft, by the way it's composed. But what he's going to do is he's obviously going to have his character escape, because the narrative got to us somehow. The narrative got to us somehow, so he had to have gotten out of this situation that he's in. The how is really the plot that's been hanging over this whole novel. But he named it, Edward Bulwer Lytton named it The Coming Race. The Coming Race. He could have named it something else. But as he was going along on his first draft, he decided to give the story a threat, and that threat is that this subterranean race of people with their quasi magic energy technology, Vril, are coming for us. And the implication in the title is that they're coming for us because of something that this character that we're reading about has done. Because if we're 19th century people, we know that Edward Bulwer Lytton is also trying to write suspense slash horror. It's just one of the things that is popular at that time. The Victorian ghost story was a big deal during the Victorian era, and so he's participating in this kind of spooky literature, spooky what if stuff. That was all the rage. People like to be scared, and so he's trying to scare his cultural milieu, but he's neither as good as Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, nor as clever as um, Lovecraft or any of Lovecraft's milieu. And so he's just not a good writer. But we're reading this not because this work is scary, or because he's a good writer, or because we want to pay particular honor to Edward Bulwer Lytton or this book, but because I'm trying to scare your pants off that Nazis today and in the 1930s thought that this book was nonfiction. They thought that it was real, that it happened. And that should scare your fucking pants off. That there are people that stupid. So I'm gonna pop that open here in a second. People as stupid as Colby Lachlan and Chad Dolan and Time is Lost and Rye Raven and this Josh character. It's hard to believe that they could possibly have survived this long, but here they are. Their mothers must really, really love them, because I could not imagine anyone else doing the same. So he's gonna escape, obviously, but and the coming part is about something that he's done, even though he hasn't really foreshadowed that anywhere. Um, and all of the sexual tension between him and his princess are also going to come to naught. Um, because it's the Victorian era, and sex just did not happen in novels. He's being intentionally scandalesque. It's not really scandalous, but close enough that what he's writing is dangerous. And back then, it was a point of pride to read challenging literature that challenged your perceptions, challenged your assumptions, challenged your worldview, challenged your existing knowledge base. And so here we go. I am going to challenge you with Edward Bulwer Lytton's The Coming Race in a few seconds. Maybe? There we go. Oh, my computer needs a reboot bad. Been working hard, haven't you, Sharon? Just like your namesake. Staying busy. Alright. I don't actually remember what the last chapter was about. I've missed 2 days, and I know I was just done by the time we got through with that chapter. So I don't remember exactly what they were arguing about, but he and Z were arguing in chapter 25, and here begins chapter 26. I can do this. I think I've got the battery to be able to do this. It's gonna go, but then I won't have to project my voice nearly so loud. I turn off my external battery, and that goes there. This can come to here, and there we go. After the conversation with Z just recorded, I fell into a profound melancholy. The curious interest with which I had hitherto examined the life and habits of this marvelous community was at an end. I could not banish from my mind the consciousness that I was among a people who, however kind and courteous, could destroy me at any moment without scruple or compunction. The virtuous and peaceful life of the people which, while new to me, had seemed so wholly a contrast to the contentions, the passions, the vices of the upper world, now began to oppress me with a sense of dullness and monotony. Even the serene tranquillity of the lustrous air preyed on my spirits. I longed for a change, even to winter, or storm, or darkness. I began to feel that, whatever our dreams of perfectibility, our restless aspirations toward a better and higher and calmer sphere of being, we, the mortals of the upper world, are not trained or fitted to enjoy for long the very happiness of which we dream, or to which we aspire. Now, in this social state of the Vrilya, it was singular to mark how it contrived to unite and harmonize into one system nearly all the objects which the various philosophers of the upper world have placed before human hopes as the ideals of a utopian future. It was a state in which war, with all its calamities, was deemed impossible, a state in which the freedom of all and each was secured to the uttermost degree, without one of those animosities which make freedom in the upper world dependent on the perpetual strife of hostile parties. Here, the corruption which debases democracies was as unknown as the discontents which undermine the thrones of monarchies. Equality here was not a name, it was a reality. Riches were not persecuted because they were not envied. Here, those problems connected with the labors of a working class hitherto insoluble above ground, and above ground conducing to such bitterness between classes, were solved by a process the simplest. A distinct and separate working class was dispensed with altogether. Mechanical inventions, constructed on the principles that baffled my research to ascertain, worked by an agency infinitely more powerful and infinitely more easy of management than aught we have yet extracted from electricity or steam with the aid of children whose strength was never overtasked, but who loved their employment as sport and pastime, sufficed to create a public wealth so devoted to the general use that not a grumbler was ever heard of. The vices that wrought our cities here had no footing. Amusements abounded, but they were all innocent. No merrymakings conduced to intoxication, to riot, to disease. Love existed, and was ardent in pursuit, but its object once secured was faithful. The adulterer, the profligate, the harlot, were phenomena so unknown in this commonwealth that even to find the words by which they were designated, one would have had to search throughout an obsolete literature composed thousands of years before. They who have been students of theoretical philosophies above ground know that all these strange departures from civilized life do but realize ideas which have been broached, canvassed, ridiculed, contested for, sometimes partially tried, and still put forth in fantastic books, but have never come to practical result. Nor were these all the steps toward theoretical perfectibility which this community had made. It had been the sober belief of Descartes that the life of man could not be prolonged, not, indeed, on this earth, to eternal duration, but to what he called the age of the patriarchs, and modestly defined to be from 100 to 150 years average length. Well, even this dream of sages was here fulfilled, nay, more than fulfilled, for the vigor of middle life was preserved even after the term of a century was past. With this longevity was combined a greater blessing than itself, that of continuous health. Such diseases as befell the race were removed with ease by scientific applications of that agency, life-giving as life-destroying, which is inherent in vril.
Even this idea is not unknown above ground, though it has generally been confined to enthusiasts or charlatans and emanates from confused notions about mesmerism, odic force, etc., passing by such trivial contrivances as wings, which every schoolboy knows has been tried and found wanting, from the mythical or prehistoric period. I proceed to that very delicate question. Urged of late as essential to the perfect happiness of our human species by the two most disturbing and potential influences on upper ground society, womankind and philosophy. I mean the rights of women. Now, it is allowed by jurisprudence that it is idle to talk of rights where there are not corresponding powers to enforce them, and above ground, for some reason or other, man and his physical force and the use of weapons, offensive and defensive, when it come to positive personal contest, can, as a rule of general application, master women. But among this people, there can be no doubt about the rights of women, because, as I have before said, the guy, physically speaking, is bigger and stronger than the yarn, and her will being also more resolute than his, and will being essential to the direction of the vril force, she can bring to bear upon him more potently than he on herself the mystical agency which art can extract from the occult properties of nature. Therefore, all that our female philosophers above ground contend for as to the rights of women is conceded as a matter of course in this happy commonwealth. Besides such physical powers, the guy I have, at least in youth, a keen desire for accomplishments and learning which exceeds that of the male, and thus they are the scholars, the professors, the learned portion, in short, of the community. Of course, in this state of society, the female establishes, as I have shown, her most valued privilege, that of choosing and courting her wedding partner. Without that privilege, she would despise all the others. Now, above ground, we should not unreasonably apprehend that a female thus potent and thus privileged, when she had fairly hunted us down and married us, would be very imperious and tyrannical. Not so with the guy. Once married, the wings, once suspended, and more amiable, complacent, docile mates, more sympathetic, more sinking than their loftier capacities into the study of their husbands' comparatively frivolous tastes and whims. No poet could conceive in his visions of conjugal bliss. Lastly, among the more important characteristics of the Vril-Ya as distinguished from our mankind, lastly and most important on the bearing of their life and the peace of their commonwealths, is their unusual agreement in the existence of a merciful, beneficent deity, and of a future world to the duration of which a century or two or moments too brief to waste upon thoughts of fame and power and avarice, while with that agreement is combined another, viz., since they can know nothing as to the nature of that deity beyond the fact he spells deity wrong. Anyway, deity beyond the fact of his supreme goodness, nor of that he spells it deity. It's Deity, and he spells it deity. Diety. A deity would be like a Greek, like a German diet, like a kind of government. That's not what he's talking about. Spelled the word wrong. God, I hate this fucking guy. Beyond the fact of his supreme goodness, nor of that future world beyond the fact of its felicitous existence, so their reason forbids all angry disputes or insoluble questions. Thus they secure for that state in the bowels of the earth what no community ever secured under the light of the stars, all the blessings and consolations of a religion without any of the evils and calamities which are engendered by strife between one religion and another. It would be then utterly impossible to deny that the state of existence among the Vril-Ya is thus, as a whole, immeasurably more felicitous than that of superterrestrial races, and realizing the dreams of our most sanguine philanthropist, almost approaches to a poet's conception of some angelical order. And yet, if you would take 1,000 of the best and most philosophical of human beings you couldn't find in London, Paris, Berlin, New York, or even Boston, and place them as citizens in the beatified community, my belief is that in less than a year they would either die of ennui or attempt some revolution by which they would militate against the good of the community and be burnt into cinders at the request of the Tur. Certainly, I have no desire to insinuate through the medium of this narrative any ignorant disparagement of the race to which I belong. I have, on the contrary, endeavored to make it clear that the principles which regulate the social system of the Vril-Ya forbid them to produce those individual examples of human greatness which adorn the annals of the upper world. Where there are no wars, there can be no Hannibal, no Washington, no Jackson, no Sheridan. Where states are so happy that they fear no danger and desire no change, they cannot give birth to a Demosthenes, a Webster, a Sumner, a Wendell Holmes, or a Butler. And where a society attains to a moral standard in which there are no crimes and no sorrows from which tragedy can extract its aliment of pity and sorrow, no salient vices or follies on which comedy can lavish its mirthful satire, it has lost the chance of producing a Shakespeare, or a Moliere, or a Mrs. Beecher Stowe, or a narrative that's interesting about it. But if I have no desire to disparage my fellow men above ground in showing how much the motives that impel the energies and ambition of individuals in the society of contest and struggle become dormant or annulled in a society which aims at a securing for the aggregate the calm and innocent felicity which we presume to be the lot of beatified immortals, neither, on the other hand, have I the wish to represent the commonwealths of the Vril-Ya as an ideal form of political society, to the attainment of which our own efforts of reform should be directed. On the contrary, it is because we have so combined throughout the series of ages the elements which compose human character that it would be utterly impossible for us to adopt the modes of life or to reconcile our passions to the modes of thought among the Vril-Ya, that I arrived at the conviction that this people, though originally not only of our human race, but, as seems to me clear by the roots of their language, descended from the same ancestors as the great Aryan family, from which in varied streams has flowed the dominant civilization of the world, and having, according to their myths and their history, passed through phases of society familiar to ourselves, had yet now developed into a distinct species with which it was impossible that any community in the upper world could amalgamate, and that if they ever emerged from those nether recesses into the light of day, they would, according to their own traditional persuasions of their ultimate destiny, destroy and replace our existent varieties of man. For some reason. Anyway, he's saying that they speak an Indo-European language variant, and that maybe the idea here is that the Indo-European language variant actually emerged from them, not they diverged from us. It may indeed be said, continues our narrator, since more than one guy could be found to conceive a partiality for so ordinary a type of our super-terrestrial race as myself, that even if the Vril-Ya did appear above ground, we might be saved from extermination by intermixture of race. But this is too sanguine a belief. Instances of such mesalliance would be as rare as those of intermarriage between the Anglo-Saxon immigrants and the Red Indians. Nor would time be allowed for the operation of familiar intercourse. Actually, he's exactly wrong about that. The Vril-Ya, on emerging, induced by the charm of a sunlit heaven to form their settlements above ground, would commence at once the work of destruction, seize upon the territories already cultivated, and clear off without scruple all the inhabitants who resisted that invasion. Yeah, because that's what the British Empire did to the Indians, right? Idiot. And considering their contempt for the institutions of Kumpash, or popular government, and the pugnacious valor of my beloved countrymen, I believe that if the Vril-Ya first appeared in free America, as being the choicest portion of the habitable earth, they would doubtless be induced to do, and said, "This quarter of the globe we take, citizens of a Kumpash, make way for the development of species," and the Vril-Ya, my brave compatriots, would show fight, and not a soul of them would be left in this life to rally round the stars and stripes at the end of a week. I now say but little of Z, save at meals, when the family assembled and she was then reserved and silent. My apprehensions of danger from an affection I had so little encouraged or deserved, therefore, now faded away. But my dejection continued to increase. I pined for escape to the upper world, but I racked my brains in vain for any means to effect it. I was never permitted to wander forth alone, so that I could never even visit the spot on which I had alighted, and see if it were possible to reascend to the mine, nor even in the silent hours, when the household was locked in sleep, Could I have let myself down from the lofty floor in which my apartment was placed? I knew not how to command the automata who stood mockingly at my beck beside the wall, nor could I ascertain the springs by which were set in movement the platforms that supplied the place of stairs. The knowledge how to avail myself of these contrivances had been purposefully withheld from me. Oh, that I could but have learned the use of wings, so freely here at the service of every infant, that I might have escaped from the casement, regained the rocks, and buoyed myself aloft through the chasm on which the perpendicular sides forbade place for human footing. Chapter 27. One day, as I sat alone and brooding in my chamber, Tari flew in at the open window and alighted on the couch beside me. I was always pleased with the visits of a child, in whose society, if humbled, I was less eclipsed than in that of Arna, who had completed their education and matured their understanding. And as I was permitted to wander forth with him for my companion, and as I longed to revisit the spot in which I had descended into the netherworld, I hastened to ask him if he were at leisure for a stroll beyond the streets of the city. His countenance seemed to me graver than usual as he replied, "I come hither on purpose to invite you forth." We soon found ourselves in the street, and had not gone far from the house when we encountered 5 or 6 young Gaiai who were returning from the fields with baskets full of flowers, and chanting a song in chorus as they walked. A young guy sings more often than he talks. They stopped on seeing us, accosting Tari with familiar kindness, and me with the courteous gallantry which distinguishes the Gaiai in their manner toward our weaker sex. And here I may observe that, though a virgin Guy is so frank in her courtship to the individual she favors, there is nothing that approaches to that general breadth and loudness of manner which those young ladies of the Anglo-Saxon race, to whom the distinguished epithet of fast is accorded, exhibit towards young gentlemen whom they do not profess to love. No, the bearing of the Gaiai towards males is extraordinary and very much that of high-bred men and the gallant societies of the upper worlds, toward ladies whom they respect but do not woo, deferential, complimentary, exquisitely polished, what we should call chivalrous. Certainly I was a little put out by the number of civil things addressed to my amour propre, that means proper love, which were said to me by those courteous young Gaiai. In the world I came from, a man would have thought himself aggrieved, treated with irony, chafed, if so vulgar a slang word may be allowed on the authority of the popular novelists who use it so freely. When one fair guy complimented me on the freshness of my complexion, another on the choice of colors in my dress, a third, with a sly smile, on the conquest I had made at our friend's entertainment. But I knew already that all such language was what the French call banal, and did not express in the female mouth below earth that sort of desire to pass for amiable with the opposite sex which, above earth, arbitrary custom and hereditary transmission demonstrate by the mouth of the male. And just as a high-bred young lady above earth, habituated to such compliments, feels that she cannot, without impropriety, return them, nor evince any great satisfaction at receiving them, so I, who had learned polite manners at the house of so wealthy and dignified a minister of that nation, could but smile and try to look pretty, and bashfully disclaiming the compliments showered upon me. While we were thus talking, Tari's sister, it seems, had seen us from the upper rooms of the royal palace at the entrance of the town, and, precipitating herself on her wings, alighted in the midst of the group. Singling me out, she said, though still with the inimitable deference of manner, which I have called chivalrous, yet not without a certain abruptness of tone which, as addressed to the weaker sex, Sir Philip Sidney might have termed rustic, "Why do you never come to see us?" While I was deliberating on the right answer to give to the unlooked-for question, Tari said quickly and sternly, "Sister, you forget. The stranger is of my sex. It is not for persons of my sex, having due regard for reputation and modesty, to lower themselves by running after the society of yours." This speech was received with evident approval by the young Gaiai in general, but Tari's sister looked greatly abashed. Poor thing. And a princess, too. Just at this moment a shadow fell on the space between me and the group, and turning round, I beheld the chief magistrate coming close upon us, with the silent and stately pace peculiar to the Vril Ya. At the sight of his countenance, the same terror which had seized me when I first beheld it returned. On that brow, in those eyes, where there was the same indefinable something which marked the being of a race fatal to our own. That strange expression of serene exemption from our common cares and passions, of conscious, superior power, compassionate and inflexible as that of a judge who pronounces doom. I shivered, and, inclining low, pressed the arm of my child friend and drew him onward silently. The tour placed himself before our path, regarded me for a moment without speaking, then turned his eye quietly on his daughter's face, and, with a grave salutation to her and the other Gaiai, went through the midst of the group, still without a word. Chapter 28. When Tari and I found ourselves alone on the broad road that lay between the city and the chasm through which I had descended into this region beneath the light of the stars and the sun, I said under my breath, "Child and friend, there is a look in your father's face which appalls me. I feel as if, in its awful tranquillity, I gazed upon death." Dari did not immediately reply. He seemed agitated and, as if debating with himself by what words to soften some unwelcome intelligence. At last he said, "None of the Vrilya fear death. Do you? The dread of death is implanted in the breasts of the race to which I belong. We can conquer it at the call of duty, of honor, of love. We can die for a truth, for a native land, for those who are dearer to us than ourselves. But if death do really threaten me now and here, where are such counteractions to the natural instinct which invests with awe and terror the contemplation of severance between soul and body?" Dari looked surprised, but there was great tenderness in his voice as he replied, "I will tell my father what you say. I will entreat him to spare your life. He has, then, already decreed to destroy it." "'Tis my sister's fault or folly," said Tari, with some petulance. "But she spoke this morning to my father, and, after she had spoken, he summoned me, as a chief among the children who are commissioned to destroy such lives as threaten the community, and he said to me, 'Take thy vril staff, and seek the stranger who has made himself dear to thee. Be his end painless and prompt.' And," I faltered, recoiling from the child, "and it is, then, for my murder that thus treacherously thou hast invited me forth. No, I cannot believe it. I cannot think thee guilty of such a crime." "It is no crime to slay those who threaten the good of the community. It would be a crime to slay the smallest insect that cannot harm us." "If you mean that I threaten the good of the community because your sister honors me with the sort of preference which a child may feel for a strange plaything, it is not necessary to kill me. Let me return to the people I have left and by the chasm through which I descended. With a slight help from you, I might do so now. You, by the aid of your wings, could fasten to the rocky ledge within the chasm the cord that you found, and have no doubt preserved. Do but that. Assist me but to the spot from which I alighted, and I vanish from your world forever. And as surely as if I were among the dead." "The chasm through which you descended! Look round. We stand now in the very place where it yawned. What see you? Only solid rock. The chasm was closed by the orders of Arflin, as soon as communication between him and yourself was established in your trance, and he learned from your own lips the nature of the world from which you came. Do you not remember when Z bade me not question you as to yourself or your race? On quitting you that day, Arflin accosted me and said no path between the stranger's home and ours should be left unclosed, or the sorrow and evil of his home may descend to ours. Take with thee the children of thy band, smite the sides of the cavern with your vril staves, till the fall of their fragments fills up every chink, through which a gleam of our lamps could force it away." As the child spoke, I stared aghast at the blind rocks before me, huge and irregular, the granite masses showing by charred discoloration where they had been shattered, rose from footing to rooftop. Not a cranny. "All hope, then, is gone," I murmured, sinking down on the craggy wayside, "and I shall never more see the sun." I covered my face with my hands and prayed to him whose presence I had so often forgotten, when the heavens had declared his handiwork. I felt his presence in the depths of the nether earth and amidst the world of the grave. I looked up, taking comfort and courage from my prayers, and gazing with a quiet smile into the face of the child, said, "Now, if thou must slay me, strike." Dari shook his head gently. "Nay," he said, "my father's request is not so formally made as to leave me no choice. I will speak with him, and may prevail to save thee. Strange that thou shouldst have the fear of death, which we thought was only the instinct of the inferior creatures, to whom the convictions of another life has not been vouchsafed. With us, not an infant knows such a fear. Tell me, my dear Tish," he continued after a little pause, "would it reconcile thee more to departure from this form of life, to that form of life which lies on the other side of the moment called death? Did I share the journey? If so, I will ask my father whether it be allowable for me to go with thee. I am one of our generation destined to emigrate, when of age for it, to some regions unknown within this world. I would just as soon emigrate now to regions unknown in another world. The all good is no less here than there. Where is he not? Child, said I, seeing by Tari's countenance that he spoke in serious earnest, it is crime in thee to slay me. It were a crime not less in me to say, slay thyself. The all-good chooses his own time to give us life, and his own time to take it away. Let us go back. If, on speaking with thy father, he decides on my death, give me the longest warning in thy power, so that I may pass the interval in self-preparation. Chapter 29. In the midst of those hours set apart for sleep and constituting the night of the Vilya, I was awakened from the disturbed slumber into which I had not long fallen, by a hand on my shoulder. I startled and beheld Z standing before me. Hush, she said in a whisper. Let no one hear us. Dost thou think that I have ceased to watch over thy safety because I could not win thy love? I have seen Tari. He has not prevailed with his father, who had meanwhile conferred with the three sages who, in doubtful matters, he takes into counsel, and by their advice he has ordained thee to perish when the world reawakens to life. I will save thee. Rise and dress. Z pointed to a table by the couch on which I saw the clothes I had worn on quitting the upper world, and which I had exchanged subsequently for the more picturesque garments of the Vilya. The young guy then moved toward the casement and stepped into the balcony, which hastily and wonderingly I donned my own habiliments. When I joined her on the balcony, her face was pale and rigid. Taking me by the hand, she said softly, See how brightly the art of the Vilya has lighted up the world in which they dwell. Tomorrow the world will be dark with me. She drew me back into the room without waiting for my answer, thence into the corridor from which we descended into the hall. We passed into the deserted streets and along the broad upward road which wound beneath the rocks. Here, where there is neither day nor light, the silent hours are unutterably solemn. The vast space illumined by mortal skill is so wholly without the sight and stir of a mortal life. Soft, as were our footsteps, their sounds vexed the ear, as out of harmony with the universal repose. I was aware in my own mind, though Z said it not, that she had decided to assist my return to the upper world, and that we were bound towards the place from which I had descended. Her silence infected me and commanded mine, and now we approached the chasm. It had been reopened, not presenting indeed the same aspect as when I had emerged from it, but through that closed wall of rock before which I had last stood with Tari, a new cliff had been riven, and along its blackened sides still glimmered sparks and smoldering embers. My upward gaze could not, however, penetrate more than a few feet into the darkness of the hollow void, and I stood dismayed and wondering how that grim ascent was to be made. Z divined my doubt. Fear not, said she, with a faint smile. Your return is assured. I began this work when the silent hours commenced, and all else were asleep. Believe that I did not pause till the path back into thy world was clear. I shall be with thee a little while yet. We do not part until thou sayest, Go, for I need thee no more. My heart smote me with remorse at these words. Ah, I exclaimed, would that thou wert of my race, or I of thine, then I should never say I need thee no more. I bless thee for those words, and I shall remember them when thou art gone, answered the guide tenderly. During this brief interchange of words, Z had turned away from me, her form bent and her head bowed over her breast. Now she rose to the full height of her grand stature and stood fronting me. While she had been thus averted from my gaze, she had lighted up the circlet that she wore around her brow, so that it blazed as if it were a crown of stars. Not only her face and her form, but the atmosphere round were illuminated by the effulgence of the diadem. Now, said she, put thine arm around me for the first and last time. Nay, thus, courage and cling firm. As she spoke, her form dilated, the vast wings expanded. Clinging to her, I was borne aloft through the terrible chasm. The starry light from her forehead shot around and above us through the darkness. Brightly and steadfastly and swiftly as an angel may soar heavenward with the soul it rescues from the grave, went the flight of the guy, till I heard in the distance the hum of human voices, the sounds of human toil. We halted on the flooring of one of the galleries of the mine. Beyond, in the vista, burned the dim, feeble lamps of the miners. Then I released my hold. The guy kissed me on my forehead, passionately, but as with a mother's passion, and said as the tears gushed from her eyes, Farewell now forever. Thou wilt not let me go into thy world. Thou canst never return to mine. Ere our household shake off slumber, the rocks will have again closed over the chasm, not to be reopened by me, nor perhaps by others, for ages yet unguessed. Think of me sometimes, and with kindness. When I reach the life that lies beyond this beck and time, I shall look round for thee. Even there, the world consigned to thyself and thy people may have rocks and gulfs which divide it from that in which I rejoin those of my race that have gone before, and I may be powerless to cleave my way to regain these I have cloven to way to lose. Her voice ceased. I heard the swan-like sough of her wings, and saw the rays of her starry diadem receding far and farther through the gloom. I sate myself down for some time, musing sorrowfully. Then I rose and took my way with slow footsteps toward the place in which I heard the sounds of men. The miners I encountered were strange to me, of another nation than my own. They turned to look at me with some surprise, but finding that I could not answer their brief questions in their own language, they returned to their work and suffered me to pass on unmolested. In fine, I regained the mouth of the mine, little troubled by other interrogatories, save those of a friendly official to whom I was known, and lucky he was too busy to talk much with me. I took care not to return to my former lodging, but hastened that very day to quit a neighborhood where I could not long have escaped inquiries, to which I could have given no satisfactory answers. I regained in safety my own country, in which I have been long peacefully settled, and engaged in practical business, till I retired on a competent fortune 3 years ago. I have been little invited and little tempted to talk of the rovings and adventures of my youth, somewhat disappointed, as most men are, in matters connected with household love and domestic life. I often think of the young guy as I sit alone at night and wonder how I could have rejected such a love, no matter what dangers attended it, or by what conditions it was restricted. Only, the more I think of a people calmly developing, and regions excluded from our sight and deemed uninhabitable by our sages, powers surpassing our most disciplined modes of force, and virtues to which our life, social and political, becomes antagonistic in proportion as our civilization advances. The more devoutly I pray that ages may yet elapse before there emerge into sunlight our inevitable destroyers. Being, however, frankly told by my physician that I am afflicted by a complaint which, though it gives little pain and no perceptible notice of its encroachments, may at any moment be fatal, I have thought it my duty to my fellow men to place on record these forewarnings of the coming race. Jesus. That's so bad. Anyway, it's over now. It can't hurt me anymore. It can't hurt you anymore, Shaggy. It's over now, man. And there's that. Fiend. I will be reading something else for you tomorrow. I have not decided what yet. It will happen. You will learn when you learn. But now we have read all of The Coming Race by Edward Bulwer Lytton for the channel. So now, as you consume the This Is Not Robert Longshore memoirs of the Fulcrum of Fate material, you can notice where I'm just so much fucking better. I have deviated like a genius would do. So, I did a lot of reading. Like, okay, so if this is what it would be like if a stupid person wrote a book, start reading the book and you're like, well, this answers the question. What would it be like if this book were written by a stupid person? And then you do that a few times. And then you just go, okay, well, what would it be like if a genius wrote a book? What would a book that I think would impress me as the work of a genius? And then you set about to write that. So that when people read it, they don't go, oh, okay, this is what it would be like if a stupid person wrote this book. Really, that's basically the difference. And, they say that there's a fine line between genius and insanity. And the line is whether you nail your goal of not doing something in the manner that a stupid person would do. If you try something, right? You try something, and then it turns out that you did it in the manner that a stupid person would do it, yeah, you cross the line into insanity. But if you do it in a manner that a genius would do it, you haven't crossed the line into insanity. It's pretty easy fucking binary, actually. The line's not that thin. And that's the show. Thanks for being here. If you want to do your inane chatter, you can go ahead, but you're not going to be invited to it for very long. So get it out if that's what you want. I'm preparing for bed. I'm preparing for sleep. Zippity doo da zippity, my oh my, what a wonderful day. Please don't sue me, Disney. I promise I'm gay. What? That's not what I meant to say. But doo boo dee boo da boo dee boo dee ba boo ba boo dee ba boo. I'm impressed that the three of you are sticking around. I don't know who you are. Thanks for being here. This is where I would normally say my tip jar is available at Cash App and PayPal. Check out the Patreon for exclusive Shaggy Phil Alitaia material you will only find there. In fact, you might want to start checking that more frequently. There's a very good chance there's going to be a lot of shit that goes up onto the Patreon before it goes up to the YouTubes. You're probably gonna want to check there starting soon. Not that any of you checks me. Okay, you motherfucker. Ow, that hurt real bad. So if you ever get the opportunity to herniate your pelvis, I would highly recommend against it. Everything hurts. All the time. Okay. All right, YouTube. It's a work day, guys. It might not seem like shit to you, but it's what I can do. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best to encourage people to, if they think that my material sucks, to make material that you won't think sucks. Trying to show you the blueprint, trying to show you a method. Stay tuned.